Okay, so I've decided to start just mocking the whole side up. I was going to start, just do the back half, the front to the door, and then leave the whole front end off till a later point when I had the nose and everything. But there's just too many questions that had to be answered here. So especially with these tires, making sure that they would steer out and clear the fenders. So initially, what I did was I spaced the door out. It's about 1.5 inches at the back and 1 inch at the front, which caused some issues up here. I had to redesign basically this, how it interacts with this pivot point, because the center of the pivot point of the hinge is right here. It's about 2 1/8 of an inch. So what I did was I just radiused 2 1/8 of an inch from that point right there, so that when you open it, it doesn't bind up in here and that it doesn't get too close, because the shape was wrong. It was based off of the fact that normally it's about 1 inch further in. Anyway, so I had to develop this piece out, make sure that this all interacted correctly into the door. Create an armature across the top over here to based on the original fender. It has to slope off pretty hard over here because of the transition I had to make with the fender and the hood. So this is different here as far as that's concerned. Arcing over here pretty hard to get into this area, because I have the hood dropped down as far as I can have it over there to try and get this nose to profile out right. We don't want it pitching up in the air. So anyway, I've got the top of the fender kind of just made up with this tubing right now, and I'll cover it with some cardboard or some paper in order to be able to see what's going on. I've got the body line followed out all the way over here. This is representing the body line here. Now the normal fender goes about 2 inches down from this body line, and you can see that we don't really have that much room just even to start off with a pretty radical shape right there. That's the profile of where the nose will interact with the front of the fender. So anyway, basically just a mock-up. I made this cardboard quarter panel just so I could put that on there 2 inches out to try and see how this all blended in. Pulling it out 2 inches at the center, actually starting at the back of the wheel, so it's a little wider, almost 3 inches here off the tire, and then back into 2 for a minimum at the front over here. And this is what this is all looking like right here. But the shape that I ended up with the mid fender here is it's pretty radical. It goes out pretty wide, and then has to dive back in to get to the door right here. The lens of the camera distorts everything, makes it look a little bit more exaggerated than it is, but it is pretty deep. So it definitely wouldn't have worked if we didn't widen the door out, and still may not work. We may want to pull that back in, get narrower tires. Don't know that yet. It's kind of hard to see right here how that all looks until I get it papered up. But it's a hunt and peck method. This door gap's going to have to be at least 1/4 of an inch if this ends up being flush. If it can be pulled out a little bit more, then we can close this up so that this rolls in, underneath there. But the pivot point, it's a little bit different relative to the face here, so it wants to interact a little bit differently. And anyway, this is where I'm going with it to try and get a good look and see what we've got. All right, so this is what it's looking like with the armature done. The armature is just basically going to be a guide for me to cut and place the fender itself, sort of a buck to hold everything up while I get it to this shape. But the wheel opening is a little bit, about 3/4 of an inch higher here to the body line than it would be stock, and it's about 1.5 inches front to rear longer. I don't know what it looks like just yet with the tire straightened out, but I wanted to finish it in place with the tire cut out like that to see what it was going to look like with the wheel turned out. Anyway, that's what it's starting to look like. Okay, so this is what it's looking like with the with this paper covering it. So you can see the surface area and how it relates to the rest of the body, as far as how it whips out, comes back in at the door, goes back out at the quarter panel, kicks out a little bit at the front, at the bottom, also at the front over here. Try and spread it out a little bit to taper into the nose a little easier. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that little stick out of there and let the wheel turn straight and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's what it's looking like with the wheel turned straight, so it doesn't look too bad. Yeah, so anyway, we'll see what happens next. Okay, so we were looking at the pictures last night, and basically the front fender looked good, but it made the rear quarter look small. It was only out 2 inches, which I thought that was plenty. So I just untaped the top edge here and let this cardboard mock-up just drift out another inch. So that's like a 3-inch spread here now instead of the 2-inch that I had before. The only issue here, this is going to be tricky because I want to maintain this height here, this body panel. So this has a tendency to want to come downhill because that's the way it's built. So that's where it meets it, about a 1/2 inch lower over here if you drift off this panel like this. So I'm going to have to try and make a piece that blends in maybe from a higher spot on the quarter panel up here, and so that I can try and work that in that fashion and try and bring this metal up without creating a gully or a valley here. We'll see how that works out. I'll probably have to make an independent piece that goes on the top there, and just leave about 1 inch on the quarter panel itself once I cut it off. Like I said, we'll see. Last thing I want to do is end up with a gully or a bunch of cabbage here while I'm working this panel. I want to maintain this body line where the door is all the way across here and the height. If I have to, I might end up having to trim off the top edge and drop that down a little bit, but I really don't want to do that. So the option is going to be to try and see if I can't take this panel and kind of either manipulate it up a little higher, or split it and manipulate it, or create an entire panel on the top, which is probably the best option. That will actually take the compensation. There might be a little bit of valley that has to be compensated with Bondo, but I think I'll be able to do that a little easier than trying to manipulate all of this metal all the way down and get it all even. Anyway, that's the challenge of all of this stuff, to try and make it look like it's not a horsey mess. All right, I know it seems like I'm going to be jumping around doing a lot of different things, but I have to establish some firm connecting points at this point, so I can start, reeling all of this stuff in. Everything right now so far is just lightly tacked and mocked up and kind of just sitting there. Well, one of the things I have to do is I have to make this front structure here that I made on my car that will enable me to hang the nose off the front of the car. This basically just hooks onto here, and then it secures at the bottom through the backside. At any rate, I got to come up with this structure because this structure, guides where the hood lands, and so will end up supporting the end of the fenders. And I have to lead in to all of that to get this to all, guide into where the nose is going to go. So that'll be my next step. Like I said, you'd think I would follow some sort of a plan here, but you kind of stand back sometimes and just see what needs really to be done next. And this is really something I have to kind of establish as an end point here on the car, and we can go forward from here. Okay, to start off this process, I've made a couple of plates out of 60,000 steel and bolted them to the outriggers on the frame that normally would carry the bumper. This will be the start point of my bracket. Alright, so the next step is to build some uprights off of those brackets. So I've got some 5/8 049 wall tubing, and I've run it up to this point here. And now I'll make a bracket that ties into this point over here to secure this both sides. Alright, you can see with everything clamped up in place, it's very easy to make a paper pattern and back engineer a bracket for the top. Alright, the next step with the bracket made up, I've got a weld nut on the back side here. Slide it in there and weld up the whole mess. Alright, after welding these up, cleaning them up and reinstalling them, these vertical pieces here that bolt here and then also to the bumper outrigger, I went ahead and got a level point from here out to here, put this outrigger here, and I've got this piece going all the way across from side to side, and this is basically the beginning of my support structure where I'll hang the nose off of this bar, and this will also create a nice straight boxing area for me to put my plenums in to guide the air into the radiator and to the condenser. So anyway, just building this up a little bit at a time. Also, as you can see, I didn't try to follow the lines of the hood, either the curve or the angles of the hood or the back angles. I just want something nice and a straight structure that I can run tabs off of to support the ends of these fenders, keep them from slumping, and something that I can put a rubber puck in here, an adjustable rubber puck, so that I can adjust the edge of this hood here in this corner here up and down, and a nice solid spot to go across here from this point where this latch is out to an area where you can actually reach it, because this hood's so much longer you can't release this arm here. I mean, you can go with a longer arm and put the latch back there, but I prefer to pull the latch out closer to the front of the hood, so I needed some support out here. But what I'm going to continue on here is I'm going to put some verticals in now on this, and basically we're going to run a lower rail also. So I have two more outriggers and this, and I haven't decided what I'm going to do to tie in maybe vertically on the ends to make it a little bit more stout. It's pretty stout right now. If I grab a hold of this in the middle here, I'm shaking the whole car. I'm not bending or shaking that piece. It's pretty amazing for just a little square 5/8 tube. Alright, so I have my outriggers to this top bar here, holding this top bar out, and then went ahead and put some verticals in over here, allowing for my headlights to be mounted in this area over here, and around some outriggers from the bottom section over here to secure a lower bar over here. And basically this is just to take off of stuff that we used to do in stock car racing, and what this allowed you to do is create a platform where you could run ducting back to the radiator from this core right here, and it also allowed you to make this ducting separate from what's inside of the nose piece up to the grill, so that you didn't have to try and get this whole section in all at once. Sometimes we did that. Sometimes we would make this panel here all the way out to all the convoluted areas inside the bumper and up to the grill. But basically it's a platform for where you could then install plates for hood pins off of this, and also have a top radiator shroud piece going across here, a piece of aluminum. And anyway, it's just something that's handy. It breaks the whole assembly up into two sections. You've got your stuff that's behind the nose right here, at least for this application, and then you'll have the nose, and everything will be self-contained. So you can run your duct. I'm going to run my ducting out to this platform here, and then I'll have ducting inside the nose that stays in the nose. So when you hang the nose on this car, this ducting will marry to that ducting, so that I don't have to try and work this ducting inside the nose on the car. I can do that on the bench and put the whole thing, hang the whole thing on as a unit with the ducting already in it. Anyway, that's where we're going with this. Just thought I'd show you my intentions here. It's kind of hard to see with the light beaming off there, but you can see the top here, there's a flange that's connected to the nose, and it hooks over that top bar right there, and then on the bottom there's another flange inside the nose so that the whole thing rests against the framework, and then it's bolted from the backside into that flange, so that secures the nose independent of the fenders and everything else, so that you don't have to worry about complicated tie-ins. Anyway, that's the principle of what I'm going through over here, and it also this is how it looks mounting the headlights. I'm not exactly sure where these headlights will be mounted, a little spread out a little farther because this nose is going to be about 2 inches wider than a standard Daytona nose. But that's the idea behind that. And anyway, again, it's a little hard to see with the lights reflecting off of this, but you get the idea. Alright, having this structure in place affords me the ability of running any kind of bracing or bracketry that I really need to re-secure things that are no longer have a place to bolt up to, based on the fact that the Hellcat nose is gone from this car. So there's different things that have to be maintained. These are the lower ducts, the intake for this cooler, and there's another cooler on the other side that's tied into the air conditioning system. But anyway, these plastic ducts had to be resecured, so it was as simple as putting a flange over here. There already was a place for it to secure through the bracketry, this bracket on the car, but this bracket was loose because normally it bolts to the nose section. So I ran this brace over here with a small bracket, solidified that, and we're good to go there. Also on this side, I had to repeat the process. Normally these are just plastic plugs that hold these in, but I just put a number 10 nut and bolt setup right here, and I'll weld up all these flanges when I get this off the car, because obviously this is plastic. Don't want to melt it in the process. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so just added one more diagonal piece over here to strengthen this up a little bit over here. And this gives me a nice spot here to create my first plate for my attachment point for my fender. And there's another spot here for a plate for an adjustable foot to hold the corner of the hood up. That'll be about it for now. I'm just going to leave this all tacked up until I figure out what I need in the way of attachment points for the fender along this edge here. What I really wanted to get to was installing this latch in this area right over here, but I have to install two of these cross members over here so that I could install the latch, catch right up in this general location over here. So this little U-shaped catch piece has to go up to the hood in this area over here. Bottom line is I can't get to that until I get this hood back off and into the hood skin to see what the profile is for this area here, because I don't want it going straight across and then there being a gap. But before I can do that, I've got this nicely spaced out 5/16 inch of material, 0.45 on both sides to take in for the wrap of the hood, wrapping in and down, and then also for taking in the fender sheet metal, wrapping in and going down on the inside and leaving me with a 3/16 gap all the way down here. So I have to basically stop up this fender edge in this location so that I can take the hood off and put those two pieces in, and we'll go on from there. All right, continuing on this little mission of mocking things up, some design details, see where everything's going to lay or how it's going to look. These are the exhausters that are normally in the hood on the Hellcat, and the Dodge Charger Daytonas had, these backward scoop looking exhausters, and decided to put the exhausters from the hood on the fenders over here. Now, initially I was worried about that because of debris being thrown up by the tires and out of this exhauster towards the windshield, which was a problem with the old Daytonas. But then I realized there's a rubber inner liner that's going to go in here that covers the tires, so it's completely shielded from any rocks or any debris, but it still will afford any heat underneath of the hood to have an exhaust avenue over here, because this will all be open to the interior of the hood area where the engine is. The other detail I was just checking out to see if we might have some room for is this is a Hellcat intake for it's like a 2015 intake for the hood, for a hood scoop, and this is the profile of the sheet metal on the power bulge hood at this location right here. So I just thought I'd mock it up to see what kind of clearances that I have. That's about, I'd say it's about a good inch off that radiator core support, which is good. And I have just enough, I think, slight an alleyway here on the bottom side of the hood to get over to this cold air box and actually create a functional hood scoop to allow some cold air into this area. On the hood that came off of this car, it had two functional intakes, smaller, but about the same square inches, but it was ducted on the bottom side of the hood to cover this opening over here. So hopefully we'll get some benefit from that. At any rate, that's what I'm doing now. I'm just kind of fooling around with that. The next thing I have to do is I have to, now that we've kind of established where we want to go with the widths of the quarter panel, I have to actually start to stabilize this door skin and attach it and complete this door first, because everything permanent to the left and everything permanent to the right depends on the location of this door skin and its final location, because there's very little you can do to adjust the door edges, but you can always move the door jamb in or out depending on where you want the door gap to be. The same with the fender. So that's what I'm going to be proceeding with next. All of this was just to kind of basically get to a commitment as to where we were going, the direction we were going to go to, as far as all of this, these various little details, which you can't really nail anything to the car until you nail down the concepts. Anyway, moving on from here. All right, so I'm beginning the process of reintroducing the door skin to the door, and the first thing I had to do is take the skin and start cleaning it up, and any places where the metal was weak, like these lower corners, welding up any of the areas that there were some pretty good pits on the backside. So that's been a little bit of a process. Also, originally, when I had cut this door away over here, I had cut it in a fashion to where this lower portion over here, where the blend lines come together, that would be right in here. I cut it from here all the way up there, because what I was going to do was I was going to pivot it, hold this as a stock location and pivot the door skin out this way. So naturally this was a good spot for that to be cut. Well, since then we've decided to just expand the entire door at the front, 1 inch and 1.5 inches at the back. So I had to put this back together, this portion of the skin. So that was a tedious process to get it to not warp up. So the other thing was I went ahead and started trying to hammer and dolly some of the imperfections out of the skin. This is actually the better of the two skins. So the reason I want to stay with the older skin is, on my car, I used brand new skins because it seemed like an awful lot of work to try and correct and fix the older skins on the doors. But it turns out that those skins, based on the fact that the reproduction skins use a softer metal, it's very, very, very easy to dent the doors. Much to my chagrin, when I was polishing the roof of the car after the car was painted, just leaning against the door with my thighs actually put some impressions in, and I had a hard time you know, with a dolly and a soft rag going on the back side of the door to try and push the shape back out. But lesson learned. This older metal's a lot tougher, and so it's better if you can possibly do it to try to recover the old door skins. So with that in mind, the next step will be to expand these flanges out. So I took a small adjustable, basically a carpenter's square like this, and used it as a guide right here, guiding on the stock quarter panel shape, and traced a line down that relates to the shape of this quarter panel, so that I can add a uniform 1.5-inch flange back to this edge of the door after I cut through this and remove this older flange. I'll do the same thing for the front when I get to that section. At any rate, it's a long, tedious process. Got to be careful, don't cut anything away before you've got the shape locked in. And so we're going to go on from here, but that's going to be next week. So I appreciate everybody that watches, and I'll see you on the next one.